It's yours, Shirley.
It's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker today, Athma Pai. Athma, please tell us about your living histories and your continuing journey through science.
Great. So I also want to echo what the previous speakers have said and say that I really want to thank you for the invitation to speak today. I think this is a really nice forum to give much more of a perspective for the work that I do, but also it's really fun to hear what other scientists, the journey that they've taken. And so I call this a continuing journey through science because I think I've had what I think of as kind of multiple stages in my research interests, and they're really informed by the experiences I've had, and also kind of more than just a particular scientific question. And so hopefully I'll get that across. Um, uh, there we go. So I think that in order to really start my story, I have to actually start a generation before me, and talk about my parents' journey through science. So both my parents are scientists. My father is a chemical engineer who was born in this very nice, idyllic area of southern India in Karnataka called Uppinkodru. And my mother was born about 50 miles away for the area, a larger city called Mangalore, and also in Karnataka. And this is actually a picture of what it's supposed to have looked like when she was born. And both of them were first generation college students. And my grandfathers were, rice farmers in the area, or kind of low-level government officials. And so it really has been quite a transformation, I think, in just one or two generations from an area where people really didn't think about science or kind of cutting-edge research all the way to really thinking daily about science. But both my parents were very interested in science and pursued degrees in Bombay at the time. And my father, in particular, actually moved to the US in 1961 for his PhD at Northwestern in chemical engineering. And I bring this up because he was funded by a NASA scholarship that was designed to bring talent from around the world to the US in order to literally put a man on the moon within 10 years. And this was President Kennedy's promise. And so I think that my childhood was really full of their immigrant experiences, and how the huge dreams of U.S. politicians and the U.S. public to in that case put a man on the moon could really fuel the change in lifestyle and kind of the dreams or the possibilities in just one generation. So my childhood was a really happy childhood. I was an only child. But we constantly traveled and had a very large family and circle of family friends, and they were constantly visiting. And I'm told I was a very curious child, and I think there are four experiences in my childhood that I think really stand out to me that shaped much of what I ended up doing in undergrad, graduate school, and beyond. And I think that these are kind of the four things I want to think about that shaped my scientific perspective. So the first is that my father, well before I was born or even he got married, was really into evolutionary theory, and became very interested in studying, Darwin, natural selection, survival of the fittest. He traveled to the Galapagos, and in particular took a safari through Kenya and Tanzania with a research expedition. So a bunch of professors and him, who was not a research professor. And he got really interested in particular in this theory called the territorial imperative, pushed forward by Konrad Lorenz and Robert Ardrey, that really talked about kind of an early formation of the debate that we now have between nature and nurture really shaping human experiences. And so that was something I heard at the dinner table, and I think that really shaped how I thought about and became really interested in evolution as a teenager. He was also a chemical engineer by training, and worked in a chemistry lab. By the time that I was born, he wasn't in the lab anymore, but he was the director of a research center. And even though he was no longer in the lab, this was the image that I had of what he did at work. And so that was the image of what I wanted to do when I grew up, is basically playing with beakers full of colorful liquid. And of course, that's not anywhere near what actually happened. The other thing that happened were two things that happened near my 16th birthday. One is that I got a gift. I was a huge reader. I constantly read mostly science fiction, and I got a gift of this book by Matt Ridley called The Autobiography of a Species in 23 chapters. And that really opened my eyes to genetics, and in particular human genetics and the human genome and genome science. And I think that obviously SLC has really shaped a lot of what I've done. And in particular, that was the right time because it was in 2003, right as the race between NIH and Celera was really heating up to sequence the human genome. So it became something that was really prominent in the news and something that I immediately knew I wanted to go study when I went to college. And then the other thing that happened was we took frequent trips to India to visit family, and this was right around the Y2K revolution in the turn of the century, where a lot of Indian brain power was really put towards developing the expertise in software engineering and in computer programming and moving to the US. And so when we'd go to India, you'd see signs like this all over the place, and without staring at them too much, they're essentially advertising for computer programming courses. And my mom, during the summer we went, realized that I was kind of bored and put me in one of these courses. So I had a crash course in C++ programming for 3 weeks. And I didn't realize at the time, but that would probably be one of the most impactful set of skills I learned before I got to college. And it's something, the concepts that I learned in those courses are something that I still use today. Okay, so I went as an undergrad to the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia. And I knew I wanted to do science. I was always very interested in science and math. And I was kind of debating between a medical and a research career. And I decided sort of randomly that biochemistry would be the right thing to study. But then also quickly realized I really didn't enjoy it as it was sold in classes. And primarily, I think what I didn't like about it was this idea that you're kind of memorizing different specific aspects of mechanisms, and it was less about practical hands-on experience, at least in the department that I was in. So I did terribly my first semester in college, and kind of needed a change. I thought I had no future in science. And so upon advice from some of my upper class mentors, I decided my second semester to take a bunch of general requirements, things that were not within my major or biochemistry related, but would allow me to kind of explore other courses. And in doing that, I discovered anthropology courses, and I suddenly realized that there was a way for me to study evolution in college. And I also, in doing that, realized that there was a branch of anthropology, in particular within physical anthropology, that was actually using genetics techniques and genetic investigation to understand either human migration, which is what I ended up doing my thesis on, but also other aspects of evolutionary theory. And so what I realized was I could really combine all my interests and work in an anthropological genetics lab. And I, in particular, worked with Theodore Schur at Penn, and ended up doing a senior thesis where I was able to collect samples from a particular Indian population and actually look at migratory patterns using mitochondrial and Y chromosome DNA. And I think that was super exciting to me, and allowed me to kind of really discover the joy of research, and allowed me also to discover that I could combine all my passions. And if I stuck with it, I could really find something I was interested in. The other thing that I realized on this journey was that science wasn't that lonely. And so this is hopefully going to be a theme through my next couple slides, that there were many people in the lab that I worked with, and these are 3 of them listed, who really made research fun, just talking to them about work and kind of discovering things together. And that was something I really discovered during my undergrad. I ended up going to the University of Chicago for my PhD, and I was in a human genetics department working on human population and comparative genomics. And here I was interested because of my undergrad research in the evolution of human traits and kind of the evolution of various different aspects of what makes different people different. And for my PhD work, I worked with Yoav Gilad and collaborated closely with Jonathan Pritchard right at the time that they were starting a really huge collaboration to generate big data in human genetics, but also in kind of functional genomics. And so to be able to understand, to be able to integrate experimental techniques that were coming online with high throughput sequencing with a lot of computational biology, mathematical modeling, and population genetics theory. And I fell in love also with this integration of using quantitative techniques to analyze biological data sets that in the past had not been able to kind of had quantitative techniques really bear on them. And again, there was a set of, in this case, postdocs who were incredibly impactful for not only my graduate career, but also the rest of my career. I still go to them for questions and advice and to commiserate. And so I think that was definitely a running theme. So we really worked hard on a lot of different aspects of molecular biology, trying to understand how different variation in human sequences could lead to variability in different steps of a pathway of making an RNA molecule and eventually a protein. And because of this, I became really interested in, I realized that, we were really looking at a simplistic picture of what made an RNA molecule or made a protein molecule, but in actuality, it looked a lot more complex. And so I realized I really didn't understand the molecular mechanisms and wanted to study that further for my postdoc. But I also realized I wanted this integration between experimental and computational techniques. And at the time in 2012, when I was starting my postdoc, there were not very many labs that did that. So I prioritized something that's a little unusual, I think. I didn't prioritize the field that I was going into. I didn't prioritize continuing on the same question that I was working on or kind of extending the questions that I was working on, but I really prioritized a combination of skill sets and followed that where it led me. And I ended up going to Chris Burge's lab at MIT to study mRNA splicing. I mean, again, this time they were not people who were senior to me, but people who were really my colleagues and contemporaries who really influenced a lot of the work that I did. So I ended up working a lot on mRNA splicing, and that really formed the basis for the work that I do now at UMass Medical School in Worcester, where we try to integrate take different techniques from RNA biology, functional genetics, and systems biology to take a quantitative perspective to understand different ways in which the timing, the accuracy, and the coordination between molecular steps can impact the levels and amounts of mRNAs that are created. So I think I've learned a lot of things that I hope I've kind of touched upon. The major things are that you really need to take advantage of the opportunities that you get along the way, aim for a diverse set of skill sets, and really be passionate about what you are working on, because ultimately that's what's going to drive the trajectory you take. And then the very final thing is to collaborate with people, and particularly collaborate with people that you want to work with, because that makes the work that we do more fun. And then finding a mentoring team from all different career stages. No one mentor is able to answer all the needs that you have. And so with that, I'll thank a lot of different mentors and collaborators I've had over the years, my current lab at UMass Medical, and then finally my family, in particular my husband and my son, because I think as I thought about this talk, I realized that a lot of what my parents did shaped the trajectory I've had, and really thinking about, kind of how do the experiences that I provide to the next generation really impact the trajectories that they might have in their own lives and careers.
Great. Thank you for a fantastic talk, Athma. And I'm applauding on behalf of the audience. So start with a question around the influence of your different early experiences and passions. You talked about coming across anthropological genetics as a way to combine those. What advice would you have for young people who are looking at different options to tap into those varied interests they may have that don't seem to connect?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I think that to some extent, I was probably a little scared to delve right into, going into evolutionary research and saying, this is what I'm interested in, because I was influenced more by what I thought I should be thinking about and should be working on. So one piece of advice that I'd have is maybe don't silo yourself and really kind of take some time to explore many different opportunities. That I think is something I learned, that if I had gone into college saying I'm going to explore things for a while, I probably would have been much happier, and it might have been easier to figure out where I wanted to go more naturally. But I think that, yeah, not limiting yourself and really saying, you know, if I'm interested in something and I contact anybody who might be working on related stuff, then I can find a way or create a way to do the research or the work I want to do.
Great, thank you. Thank you. And I'm applauding again and passing back to Srina.